When I first arrived in Port Townsend, the rain had already been falling for 2 days straight, soaking the streets until the cracks glistened like wet glass. I remember thinking the whole town looked washed out, muted blues and grays, the kind of place where people whispered instead of talked. I'd left Seattle with everything I owned stuffed into my old Subaru, which still smelled like takeout and heartbreak. After walking out on my job and Jason, who'd been cheating for months, I told myself I needed quiet. Somewhere small, somewhere no one knew me. The rental house I found was just outside downtown, tucked behind a row of overgrown cedars. It was small but had a porch that faced the ocean, and at night I could hear the foghorns moan like some half-awake creature calling out. It felt lonely, but maybe that's what I wanted. A place where the silence could drown out everything I didn't want to remember. The first week went by in a blur of unpacking and long walks along Water Street. I met only one person, a woman named Elena who lived across the street. She was around my age, maybe a little older, with auburn hair that never seemed to stay tucked behind her ear. We met when my mail accidentally ended up in her box. She smiled like she'd been expecting me. "You're Maya, right? The new tenant in the old Henson place?" We got coffee once, and it felt easy talking to her. She told me she'd just moved into her rental too, said she was starting over after a breakup. We laughed about bad exes, shared stories about sleepless nights. It felt nice to have someone nearby who understood that strange limbo between endings and beginnings. So when she invited me to a girls' sleepover the following Friday, I didn't hesitate. "It'll be fun," she said. "You've been cooped up too long. I'll make cocoa." That night I remember checking my phone before leaving. 7:40 p.m. The street was unusually quiet, and her porch light kept flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. That's when I saw him, a tall man standing near the hedges by the corner house. He wasn't moving, just staring. I thought maybe he was smoking, but there was no glow, no smell. When I mentioned it, Elena just laughed. "Oh, that's Todd. Old neighbor, kind of a night owl. He looks after the block." Inside, her place smelled faintly of damp wood and cinnamon candles. Boxes were stacked in the hallway, half unpacked. She had a way of making even clutter feel cozy. Blankets draped everywhere, fairy lights strung unevenly across the ceiling. We drank cocoa, watched some terrible romantic comedy, and talked until the kind of laughter came that makes your cheeks ache. But around 10, things started feeling off. A soft thud echoed from somewhere in the house, then a faint tapping at the back door. "Wind," Elena said quickly, not even looking up. A few minutes later, the old landline phone, which I hadn't noticed until then, rang once and stopped. No one called back. By midnight, Elena was asleep on the couch. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was breathing differently, like something unseen had shifted in the walls. Then came the creak. Slow, measured steps from below. From the basement. I told myself it was pipes, or the old house settling. But when I opened the basement door, cold air rushed up like it had been waiting. And there, hanging on the fridge beside the doorway, was a photo I hadn't seen before. Elena smiling beside a man in a plaid shirt. The caption under it read, "Sarah and Todd, 2004. My chest tightened. Elena wasn't Elena. I shook her awake, heart pounding. "Who's Sarah?" Her eyes opened, glassy and strange. For a long second, she didn't speak. Then her lips curled into a small, almost pitying smile. "You weren't supposed to see that." The words didn't sound like hers, deeper somehow, colder. I backed away, my hand finding my phone, but before I could unlock it, she sat up, tilting her head. "Maya, don't make this weird. You were lonely. I just wanted company. I'm going home." "You are home," she said softly. I ran. The back door latch snapped when I pushed it, like it had already been broken. The wind hit me hard, cold and wet, and I sprinted barefoot across the street, pounding on the nearest porch until lights flicked on inside. The neighbor, an older woman in a robe, cracked her door open, eyes wide. I barely remember what I said, just fragments. "Friend," not who she says. "Someone in the basement. The police came within minutes. Their flashing lights painted the street red and blue, but the house across the street was dark, silent again. When they broke in, it was empty. No Elena, no furniture. Just a couple of sleeping bags on the floor, some empty cocoa packets and mail stacked on the counter addressed to Sarah Coleman. A detective, Stern, I think her name was, pulled me aside. "You're sure that's her name? Elena?" "That's what she told me." "There's no Elena on this block, but Sarah Coleman." She paused, flipping through her notebook. "She went missing in 2005, last seen right here on Cedar Hollow Lane." I stared at the house. It looked smaller somehow. Hollow. Then who was I with tonight? I didn't sleep that night. The police left around 3, promising to patrol the area. The old woman next door made me tea and let me sit at her table until dawn. She told me she'd lived here since the 80s and didn't remember anyone named Elena. "That house gets new renters every couple years," she said. "Never stays full long. People hear things." I wanted to leave the next morning, but my car wouldn't start. The mechanic said moisture had corroded something in the ignition. "A few days," he told me. "Shouldn't drive it till then." So I stayed, and the longer I did, the stranger things got. My porch light kept flickering at the same time every night. 7:40, the exact minute I'd gone to Elena's. Sometimes when I walked past her empty house, I swore I heard voices inside, faint and overlapping, like an old radio station caught between channels. One night I found muddy footprints near my back door, a man's size leading from the street straight to the steps. The police said they'd keep an eye out. They didn't find anything. By week's end, I started questioning myself. Maybe I'd imagined some of it. Trauma plays tricks. I even thought about calling my parents, but I could already hear my mother's voice. "You always rush into things, Maya. You never think." So I stayed quiet, until the day a letter showed up in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in shaky ink. Inside was a photograph, the same one from Elena's fridge. Sarah and Todd, 2004. But on the back, someone had written in fresh blue pen, "You should have stayed inside." That night, I barely breathed. Every creak of the house felt deliberate. Around midnight, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I shouldn't have answered, but fear makes you do stupid things. "Maya," a voice whispered. It was her. "Elena?" A pause. Then, "Don't call me that. They're watching." "Who?" "The one you saw by the hedges. He's not gone. Don't open your door." The line went dead. I called back. Nothing. When I ran to the window, fog had swallowed the street. I couldn't see her house at all, just the faint glow of my porch light still flickering. A loud thud hit my door. Once, twice. I froze. Then the sound of something dragging across the porch boards. I didn't look. I called 911. By the time they arrived, there was no one outside, but muddy footprints circled my house again, this time smaller ones beside them. "Animal," the officer said. "Probably raccoons. Raccoons don't wear boots." I packed that night, even without a working car. I called a taxi to take me to a motel near the ferry dock. When it pulled up, the driver looked nervous. "You from Cedar Hollow?" he asked. I nodded. He hesitated. "Don't take this wrong, but that neighborhood's bad news. People vanish there. Happens every few years." I left the next morning. Never went back for the deposit, never picked up the car. I found a small apartment in Olympia, closer to people to noise. For months, I avoided anything that reminded me of that foggy street. Cinnamon candles, cedar trees, even cocoa. But sometimes in the middle of the night I wake up to my phone buzzing. An unknown number, always the same. And once when I finally answered, all I heard was breathing. Soft, slow, familiar. I hung up and blocked it. Last week, out of habit, I searched Sarah Coleman Port Townsend online. The article said her body was never found. Just missing, presumed dead. Next to the story was a grainy photo, her and the same man, Todd. But the part that made my blood run cold wasn't the photo. It was the update at the bottom of the page. Case reopened after new witness reported seeing Sarah Coleman alive in 2019. That was the year I moved there. Now, every time I think back to that night, I can't decide what haunts me more. The thought that she was a ghost, or that she wasn't. Trust your instincts no matter how irrational they seem. Loneliness can blur judgment, and danger often hides behind the faces that seem the most familiar. Some doors once opened can never truly be closed. And sometimes the scariest monsters aren't ghosts at all, but people who look perfectly ordinary in the daylight. When I turned 26, I thought I was starting fresh. My long-term relationship had ended in a messy breakup that left me questioning who I was and what I wanted. My ex and I had lived together for 3 years in Phoenix, surrounded by noise, heat, and constant reminders of the life we thought we'd build together. After everything fell apart, I couldn't stomach staying in the same city. So when I found a small 2-bedroom rental on the edge of Flagstaff, it felt like a chance to breathe again. The house wasn't perfect, the linoleum in the kitchen was warped, the heating system coughed every time it kicked on, but it backed up to a stretch of woods. From the deck you could see towering pines swaying in the mountain wind. I told myself it was exactly what I needed. Quiet, space, distance. My mom wasn't thrilled. "You're too far from everyone," she said. "What if something happens out there?" I brushed it off. At 26, I wanted to prove I could handle being on my own. The first couple of weeks passed quietly. I unpacked boxes, decorated the living room with thrift store finds, and tried to find joy in solitude. At night, though, the silence pressed in heavy. Every creak of the wood, every brush of tree branches against the windows made me pause. Still, I told myself it was just the adjustment. When my birthday rolled around, my best friend Rachel insisted on visiting. We'd been close since college, and though she lived in Phoenix, she offered to drive up for the weekend. "You shouldn't spend your birthday alone," she said over the phone. "We'll make it a girls' weekend. Movies, junk food, the works." Her visit felt like a gift. Rachel showed up Friday evening with an overnight bag, a bottle of wine, and enough snacks to fuel a football team. She teased me for how sparsely decorated the house was. "It looks like you're squatting here," she laughed, tossing her jacket onto the couch. "It's called minimalism," I joked back, though I knew she was right. That night we cooked nachos, lit candles, and streamed old horror movies. Rain drummed against the roof, thunder cracked in the distance, and Rachel grinned. "Perfect weather for a ghost story," she said, tossing a piece of popcorn at me. I laughed, but when the rain eased later, I noticed something strange through the living room window. A white sedan parked on the street directly in front of my house. Its headlights were off, and I couldn't make out anyone inside. Rachel noticed too. "Do your neighbors have visitors?" "Not that I know of," I said. The neighborhood was mostly older couples who went to bed early. I'd barely seen anyone outside after 9. We brushed it off as coincidence, but my stomach churned. I didn't want to admit it, but the car unsettled me. By 11, we were still awake, scrolling through movies we'd already seen, when Rachel suggested ordering food. "Birthday burritos," she declared, pulling up the app. We placed a Chipotle order, and I felt comforted by the thought of warm food arriving soon. 20 minutes later, I got the notification, "Driver approaching." But when I peeked outside, the sedan was still there, parked silently. "That's creepy," Rachel muttered. "Maybe that's him." But when the delivery driver finally arrived, it was a middle-aged man in a silver SUV. He handed us our burrito bowls, glanced at the car, and frowned. "Not mine," he said. "That thing was there when I pulled up. Kinda weird, huh?" Rachel and I exchanged a look, unease crawling higher in my chest. We tried to laugh it off, tried to eat, tried to focus on something lighthearted. But the car stayed parked, silent, watching. And then came the knock at the back door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. The sound froze us both. Rachel dropped her fork, and the clatter echoed through the small kitchen. "The delivery guy came to the front, right?" she whispered. "Yeah," I said, my voice thin. "Nobody uses the back door." The knock came again, louder this time. 3 deliberate raps that vibrated against the quiet. I grabbed my phone off the counter and quickly texted my neighbor, Mr. Harlan. He was in his 70s and often stayed up late watching TV. "Did you knock on my back door?" I typed. No reply. Rachel leaned close. "Who would even go back there?" I swallowed hard and forced myself toward the kitchen window. The rain had slowed, leaving drops glistening on the porch light. I squinted into the yard, but no one was there, just wet leaves and the outline of trees. As I turned back, Rachel gasped. "The car!" I ran to the living room window. The white sedan's driver's side door was now hanging open. The interior light glowed faintly, but the seat was empty. "Okay," I said, panic rising in my throat. "I'm calling 911. I reached for my phone, only it wasn't on the counter where I'd left it. My hand searched blindly, but it was gone. "Rachel, where's my phone?" Her face was pale. "You had it a second ago." Before either of us could say more, a floorboard creaked from the hallway. We froze, staring into the dark corridor that led toward the guest room. The door was half open, shadows shifting inside. "Get behind me," I whispered, gripping the handle of a kitchen knife. My voice shook, but I forced myself forward. "Whoever you are," I called. "We already called the cops." No answer. The door creaked wider and my breath caught. Inside, crouched beside the bed, was a man. His clothes were soaked from rain, his hood shadowing most of his face. He was holding something, my phone. I tightened my grip on the knife. "Give it back." He rose slowly, smiling faintly. His voice was low, calm, like he was explaining something ordinary. "You left your location on. I've been watching since you moved here." Rachel screamed, and that snapped me. I swung the knife blindly and we bolted toward the front door. His boots pounded the floor behind us as I fumbled with the lock. Somehow, my shaking hands managed to twist it open, and we spilled onto the porch, barefoot, rain soaking our clothes. We sprinted across the street to Mr. Harlan's house, pounding on his door until he opened it, startled and confused. By the time the police arrived 10 minutes later, the man and the sedan were gone. But muddy boot prints stretched across my living room floor, proof that we hadn't imagined a thing. The police were kind but detached, like they'd seen too many stories like mine. They took our statements, checked the house, and found my phone tossed into the backyard with the battery removed. "It looks planned," one officer said, jotting notes. "Could be someone casing the area." Rachel didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. We stayed in Mr. Harlan's living room, jumping at every noise. By morning, she packed her bag and said quietly, "I don't think I can stay here again." I didn't blame her. For the next week, I tried to pretend life was normal. I went to work, stopped for groceries, smiled politely at neighbors. But every night when I pulled into the driveway, I scanned the street for the sedan. Sometimes I thought I saw headlights in the distance, but by the time I looked again, they were gone. One night, lying in bed, I swore I heard knocking again. Faint this time, like fingertips brushing the back door. I froze under the blankets until it stopped. I called the landlord the next day, asked about upgrading the locks. He promised to send someone, but no one came. That weekend I went through my phone settings and noticed something chilling. My location services were still on, and several apps had been accessed around the time of the break-in. I deleted them all, but the damage was done. The thought of him, some stranger, knowing where I lived, watching me from the street, made my stomach turn. That's when I decided I couldn't stay here. It took a month to find a new place, a small apartment complex downtown with decent lighting and neighbors who came and went at all hours. It wasn't the peaceful life I thought I wanted, but it was safer. Or at least it felt that way. Packing up the house was harder than I expected. Every creak of the floor, every glance at the guest room made me feel like he was still there. I'd catch myself checking the driveway over and over, waiting for the white sedan to reappear. When moving day finally came, Rachel called me from Phoenix. "Promise me you'll never rent something that isolated again," she said. "I promise," I told her. And I meant it. The apartment was noisy, the walls thin, but the hum of traffic and chatter from neighbors gave me comfort. At night I could hear people in the hallways, and somehow that made me feel less alone. But the story didn't end there. It started a few weeks after I moved. One night, while scrolling on my new phone, I got a notification. "Your DoorDash driver is approaching." But I hadn't ordered anything. I opened the app. An order was listed under my account. Burgers and fries, paid for with a card that wasn't mine. When the driver uploaded a delivery photo, my chest tightened. The picture wasn't my apartment door. It was a car, a white sedan parked outside. It happened again the following week. Another false order, another notification, another photo, always the same white sedan. I called DoorDash support, explained the situation, and they promised to investigate. But the notifications didn't stop. And late at night, when I look out the window, sometimes I think I see it. Parked just far enough down the street to blend in, headlights dark. Watching. Safety isn't just about locks and walls. It's about vigilance. We live in a world where strangers can learn about us through our phones, our routines, our blind trust in technology. It's easy to ignore the unease, to laugh it off as paranoia, but instincts exist for a reason. If something feels wrong, a car parked too long, a knock that shouldn't be there, a phone that suddenly goes missing, don't dismiss it. Trust your gut. Because sometimes the danger isn't a ghost or a storm. It's another person. And they don't always knock before they come inside. It had been years since I'd been to Grandview, Colorado, but the town looked almost exactly as I remembered it. Quiet, half asleep under a blanket of early snow. The road that wound toward my grandparents' old vacation house still dipped through the pines and curved past the frozen creek that glinted like glass under the pale winter sun. When Mom asked me to check on the house before it sold, I said yes, out of guilt, more than anything. She hated that place. Said it gave her the creeps after Grandma and Grandpa passed. But I was 21, restless, tired of campus noise and my roommate's endless drama. A weekend alone sounded like therapy. Still, when I pulled up and saw the house, its shutters drooping, the porch sagging slightly, I hesitated. The air was thin, and the cold bit straight through my jacket. I unlocked the door, half expecting the musty smell of neglect, but what hit me was something else. Familiarity. Cedar, old perfume, dust. Like time had frozen when they died. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the furniture. Everything was just as they'd left it. My grandma's knitting basket sat beside the armchair, half-finished scarf still dangling from the needles. The clock above the fireplace had stopped at 4:23. I told myself I'd stay only the weekend. My best friend Nora was driving up that evening. We'd ordered pizza, packed some cheap wine coolers, and planned a sleepover getaway. By the time she arrived, dusk had settled over the valley. Her headlights carved streaks through the fog. She got out, stamping snow from her boots, and grinned. "You sure this isn't the opening scene of a horror movie?" "Don't jinx it," I said. Inside, the house groaned with every step, the old wood expanding against the cold. We unpacked in the living room, turning on a space heater that sounded like it might explode. There were still framed pictures on the wall, family trips, birthdays, Grandpa fishing at the creek. Nora pointed to one photo, glass cracked diagonally across Grandma's smile. "That's unsettling," she said. "Probably fell at some point," I replied, but I didn't touch it. That night we drank, laughed, and flipped through old photo albums. For a moment it almost felt like being kids again, when everything scary was pretend. But as I went to bed I caught myself glancing at the hallway mirror. My reflection lingered a little too long before fading into darkness. Saturday morning came gray and silent. Snow drifted lazily outside. Nora was still asleep upstairs, so I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching the frozen creek catch the faint light. The quiet should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. It was too still, like the house was listening. When Nora came down, she frowned. "Did you mop the floor last night?" "No, why?" She pointed near the back door. There were muddy footprints, small, sharp, from boots. We both stared. "The movers were here last week," I said. "Maybe they—" "Riley," she interrupted. "They're fresh." The prints trailed from the back door toward the hallway, then stopped near the pantry. My pulse quickened. The door was locked from the inside. We checked every window. Nothing was open. We brushed it off, but the mood shifted. Even music didn't help. Every creak felt like movement. Every gust of wind a breath against the siding. That night, around 12:30, I was half asleep on the couch when Nora whispered from the stairs, "Did you turn on the closet light?" My eyes snapped open. "What closet?" "Your grandparents' room." We went up together, flashlights trembling. The old walk-in closet's pull-string light swayed back and forth. Boxes had been pushed aside. One was toppled over. I tried to steady my voice. "Did you move those?" "No," she said, "but someone did." The sound that followed was slow, dragging footsteps from the guest room. "Hello?" Nora whispered. No answer, just another creak, closer this time. We backed toward the stairs. My heart hammered so loud I could barely breathe. Then a shadow glided across the hallway mirror, tall, unmistakably human. I grabbed Nora's wrist. "Run!" We flew downstairs. Halfway to the front door, the basement door slammed open behind us, and then, clear as if whispered right beside my ear, "Don't leave again." We didn't look back. We ran barefoot into the snow. The neighbor, Mr. Kelly, opened his door before we even reached the porch. We must have looked insane, barefoot, shaking, sobbing. He called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, they searched the house top to bottom. No sign of forced entry, no footprints outside except ours. But in the basement, under the stairs, they found something that made my stomach drop. A nest. Blankets, food wrappers, an old pillow. Half-eaten canned beans. A phone charger plugged into the wall. And worse, photographs. Dozens of them. Printed out from my social media. Pictures from college, from nights out, from my dorm. All taped neatly to the underside of the stairs. The detective's voice was calm, but clipped. "Looks like someone's been living here for a while. Probably came in through the crawl space. Maybe when the house was first listed online." Nora and I sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets, silent. I couldn't stop picturing that shadow. The whisper. "Don't leave again." I told them about it, but they said it was probably an echo or the house shifting. I knew what I heard. The officers stayed until sunrise. They said we were lucky he wasn't still there. I wasn't so sure. Back home in Denver, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of my apartment made me jump. I'd wake up convinced someone was standing just outside my door. Mom tried to reassure me. "It's over, honey. The house is being sold next week." But it didn't feel over. The police never found him. No fingerprints, no ID, no trace of who he was. Nora stopped talking about it altogether. I think she wanted to pretend it never happened. A month later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, one of me and Nora laughing on that first night at the Grandview house. On the back, in faint pencil, were 2 words. "Still here." I moved apartments within the week. It's been nearly 3 years. I don't talk about it much now. People look at you funny when you tell them your grandparents' house was haunted, not by ghosts, but by a man with a camera and nowhere else to go. But sometimes when I'm up late and the city quiets down, I hear something. A breath at the edge of silence. A whisper that curls beneath my ribs. "Don't leave again." I tell myself it's imagination. Leftover fear. But part of me knows better. Some things don't stay behind walls. They live in your head, replaying the moment your safety cracked open. I never went back to Grandview. The house sold to a couple from Boulder. Last I heard, they're remodeling. I hope they never open the crawl space, because there's something worse than ghosts, I've learned. Something more human. Something that looks at your life from behind glass, waiting for you to come home. Evil doesn't always wear a mask or rise from the grave. It often hides in the ordinary, feeding on neglect and curiosity. We forget that even familiar places can hold strangers who watch from the dark. Trust your instincts. Lock your doors. And when something feels wrong, leave. Because not every voice asking you to stay means you well. Long before the night everything collapsed into chaos, I thought I was making the smartest move of my life. At 28, I had just been promoted at a small marketing firm, and that meant relocating to Asheville, North Carolina. To me, Asheville represented a clean slate. New city, new job, new apartment, new version of myself. I had gone through my share of messy breakups, a few financial stumbles, and a lingering feeling that I'd been spinning in circles since college. This promotion felt like a way to step off the merry-go-round and finally build the life I imagined for myself. The apartment building I chose was modest. A 6-unit complex nestled in a wooded stretch near the French Broad River. Rent was manageable, the neighborhood quiet, and most importantly, the unit itself felt tucked away from the world. No noisy bar crowds, no college kids throwing beer cans at 2 a.m. Just a 2-bedroom space with beige carpets, creaky floorboards, and windows that looked out at tall, whispering trees. To me, it felt like safety. On the day I moved in, I lugged my boxes up the narrow stairwell until sweat ran down my back. The first person to greet me wasn't the landlord, but my neighbor across the hall, Miriam. She was maybe mid-40s, though her baggy sweatshirt and tired eyes made her look older. Her hair was wild, wiry strands sticking out as if she hadn't brushed it in days. She stood in her doorway as I set a box down, watching me with sharp, darting eyes. "You must be the new tenant," she said flatly. "Yeah," I smiled, brushing sweat from my forehead. "Just moved in. I'm Alex." She nodded once, stepping closer. "Units are quiet here. Don't cause trouble. Fire escapes at the end of the hall." I expected some neighborly warmth, maybe even an offer of help or a welcome note, but Miriam's delivery was clinical. She spoke like she was reading from a handbook, then retreated into her apartment without another word. I told myself she was just private, maybe shy, maybe carrying her own burdens. Not everyone had the energy to be friendly. That night, when I finally collapsed onto the couch surrounded by unpacked boxes, I thought of her again. Something about the way she stared made me uneasy, but I shook it off. She was harmless, I decided. Just one of those quirky neighbors every apartment building seemed to have. Still, as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but hear faint noises through the walls. Soft thuds, almost like tapping, coming from Miriam's side. I told myself it was pipes or the building settling, but deep down I felt the first sting of suspicion. A few weeks later, life settled into a rhythm. Work kept me busy, evenings were quiet, and my apartment became a space I was proud of. But Miriam remained a constant presence. Every morning as I left for work, she seemed to be there in the hallway. Every evening when I returned, I caught glimpses of her door cracking open, her pale face visible for a moment before vanishing. One Friday night, my best friend Derek came over for what we half-jokingly called a sleepover. We had been close since high school, and both of us worked long hours. Every few months, we'd load up snacks, video games, and cheap beer and spend a night like we were kids again. "Man, this place is tiny but cozy," Derek said, flopping onto my couch with a grin. His backpack of games thudded against the cushions. "Tiny is fine," I laughed. "Less to clean. Plus, no one above us. Just don't get me evicted tonight." We were halfway through our first game when faint knocks came from Miriam's side of the wall. Derek paused the screen. What the hell was that? Morse code? "She does that sometimes," I said, embarrassed. "I don't know. Maybe she's rearranging furniture or testing the walls." He smirked. Or maybe she's spying on us. You ever see her blink? We laughed, but my chest tightened. At around 8:30 I went to grab sodas, and that's when I saw her. Miriam standing outside my door, her face inches from the peephole. I froze. Can I help you? I asked carefully. Her lips twitched into a faint smile. Just wanted to know your schedule. When do you usually get home? I blinked. Depends. Work hours, mostly. She nodded like I'd given her something valuable. Good to know. Then she shuffled back into her apartment without another word. When I closed the door, Derek raised an eyebrow. Dude, that is not normal. I laughed nervously. Yeah, she's weird but harmless. Or so I told myself. The weeks rolled on, and Miriam's questions multiplied. She asked me when I worked late. She asked who visited me. She asked if Derek was planning to come back soon. Each interaction left me unsettled. That Friday night, Derek came again, determined to keep the mood light. We popped popcorn, stacked empty soda cans on the counter, and drowned ourselves in movies. But at 9:15, I noticed something strange. The front door was cracked open. Derek, did you unlock this? I whispered. He shook his head, eyes narrowing. We approached slowly. The hallway beyond was empty, but shadows seemed to shift inside my apartment. My stomach knotted. Then I saw her, Miriam, standing by my bedroom door, holding a kitchen knife. Her face was blank, eyes hollow, her grip tight on the handle. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? I shouted. She didn't answer. She stepped forward instead. Adrenaline took over. I grabbed the nearest lamp and swung hard, knocking the knife from her hand. Derek lunged forward, tackling her to the ground. She writhed, silent but strong. My hands shook as I dialed 911, shouting for help. The police arrived within minutes. They restrained her easily, though her eyes never left mine. One officer explained quietly that Miriam had untreated mental disorders and had been collecting spare keys, tracking my schedule, and watching me for weeks. The truth chilled me. She had been planning this. She'd even drawn diagrams of my apartment. The cut on my arm was shallow, just a graze, but the psychological scar dug deeper. I moved out within months, trading that quiet 6-unit building for a crowded complex downtown, where the walls were thin and neighbors were loud. But at least I wasn't alone in the silence. Derek tried to keep the mood light. Next sleepover, maybe just at your place, he joked, nudging me. But I saw the way his eyes darted to my door when we hung out. He was shaken too. The police assured me Miriam had been taken to a treatment facility. But some nights, I imagined her still in that building, pacing the hall, listening for the sound of footsteps outside her door. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced I heard floorboards creaking above me, even though my new apartment had no upstairs neighbors. The paranoia followed me, a shadow I couldn't quite shake. Life moved on, at least on the surface. I built routines again, buried myself in work, and filled my weekends with friends. But fear has a way of weaving itself into everyday life. At the grocery store, I caught myself scanning for her face. At the gym, I jumped at the sound of lockers slamming. At home, I checked locks twice, sometimes 3 times, before I could breathe easy. I told myself I was stronger for surviving it, but in truth I carried a fragile kind of vigilance everywhere. I remembered her expressionless face, the blank way she stepped toward me with the knife. I remembered the knocks on the wall, the endless questions, the slow encroachment on my privacy until it shattered completely. One night, months later, I sat alone in my living room. The lamp cast a warm glow across the floorboards, and the world outside was quiet. Then, faintly, I thought I heard it. A soft knock coming from somewhere inside the walls. I froze, lamp switch in hand, my body stiff with memory. And though logic told me it was nothing but pipes or settling wood, part of me still waited for Miriam's shadow to return. Evil doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it comes quietly, through small questions, strange habits, and boundaries slowly crossed. Trust your instincts when something feels off. Be kind, yes. But never ignore the voice inside that warns you to protect yourself. Because safety, once lost, is harder than anything to regain. When I think about that night, I still taste rain on the air, metallic and sharp like the edge of something I didn't see coming. People tell ghost stories all the time, but the thing that came for me in June 2017 wasn't a ghost. It was real enough to leave muddy footprints on the carpet and a voice that still creeps into my dreams. I was 16 then, just a kid in Ashford, Oregon, living in a house too big for its silence. We moved there after my dad got a promotion at the mill. The house was old, 2 stories, surrounded by pines so tall they scraped the clouds. It creaked constantly, like it was tired of standing. My mom said it had character. I thought it had secrets. Every door squealed when opened. The attic stairs groaned like someone was up there even when nobody was. Our dog Jasper wouldn't go near my room. He'd stand in the doorway whining, staring past me like he saw something behind my shoulder. I tried not to think about it. You get used to weird sounds in old houses. You tell yourself it's wind or pipes or raccoons, anything but the idea that you're not alone. Still, every night around 2, I'd wake up and swear I heard whispering above the ceiling, like someone talking through the insulation. My parents brushed it off. "You've got too much imagination, Luke," Dad said. Maybe he was right. Then came that Friday. It was June 9th, the first week of summer break, muggy and thick enough that the air felt like soup. My parents were heading to Portland for a weekend trip, Mom's anniversary surprise. I was supposed to stay with my aunt, but when she came down with the flu, my dad finally sighed and said, "You're old enough to handle a few nights, just don't burn the place down." I promised I wouldn't, but I did call my best friend Tyler. We'd known each other since 7th grade, the kind of friendship built on inside jokes and bad pizza. He brought his Xbox, and we decided to stay up all night gaming. The storm started just after sunset. Thunder rolled through the valley, and rain hammered the roof like fists. We were in my room, controllers in hand, yelling over the wind. Tyler was halfway through trash-talking me when he laughed and said, "Man, if some creep's watching us right now, at least he's got front row seats." I looked toward the window, mostly to roll my eyes, but that's when I saw it. The motion light outside flickered on. A shape stood near the trees, tall, unmoving. I blinked, and it was gone. "Probably a raccoon," Tyler said, though his voice wasn't as casual as he wanted it to sound. I wanted to believe him, but my stomach didn't. The forest behind our house stretched for miles, no neighbors until the old woman 3 houses down. If someone was out there, they didn't belong. We tried to keep playing, but our laughter died. Every sound from outside made us flinch. By 11, the storm was pounding so hard we couldn't hear ourselves think. Then came a knock. Faint. From downstairs. "Your parents?" Tyler asked. "No, they're not back until Sunday." The knocks turned into slow, dragging scrapes against the back door. I muted the TV. "Hello?" I called down the stairs, though my throat was so dry it barely came out. No answer. Then the power flickered. The room plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the white flashes of lightning outside. That's when we heard it. A voice, low and rough, coming from below. "Luke." Tyler looked at me, his eyes wide. "Luke, come here." My name. It said my name. "Dude, that's your dad," Tyler whispered, desperate. "It's not," I said. My dad didn't sound like that. This voice dragged each syllable like it hurt to speak. We froze as it came again, louder, closer. "I've been waiting, Luke." That's when instinct took over. We bolted. I yanked open the window and cold rain slapped my face. Tyler climbed out first onto the porch roof, slipping on the slick shingles. I followed, trying not to think about the footsteps now thudding up the stairs. We jumped. My ankle twisted when I hit the grass, pain slicing up my leg, but we didn't stop. We ran barefoot through mud and puddles toward Mrs. Callahan's porch light. I pounded on her door until she appeared in a nightgown, eyes wide with confusion. "What on earth?" she began, but I just gasped. "Someone's in my house." The police came fast, small-town perk. 2 patrol cars, lights cutting through the storm. They searched every room while we huddled in Mrs. Callahan's kitchen wrapped in towels. When they came back, one of them shook his head. "No one inside," he said. "Doors locked, no signs of forced entry." "But," I started. "There were muddy footprints in your room," the other officer added. "And this." He held up a small black object, a voice recorder. It was still playing, looping my name. "Luke, come here. Luke, come here." They never found fingerprints. No sign of who left it. We moved out 3 months later. Years passed before I could talk about that night without shaking. The police called it a prank. Maybe someone from school trying to scare us. But I never believed that. Nobody knew my parents were gone except Tyler, and the way that voice said my name, it knew me. We never figured out how they got in. My parents said maybe I'd left a door unlocked, but I checked every lock twice before bed that night. It's funny what you remember. The sound of rain, the metallic smell in the air, the way Jasper had barked at the attic door earlier that day, hackles raised, like he sensed something I didn't. After we moved, I stopped gaming at night, stopped opening windows during storms. Tyler and I stayed friends, but we didn't talk about it again. What was there to say? Still, sometimes, when thunder rolls in and the lights flicker, I think I hear it, faint, buried under the wind, a whisper. "Luke, come here." The therapist my parents sent me to called it trauma echo, the mind replaying what it can't process. Maybe she's right, but I can't shake the memory of that voice recorder. When the police bagged it, I caught a glimpse of the sticker on the back, a name written in faded ink. Property of L. Brennan. My name. My handwriting. But I'd never seen that recorder before in my life. A month before we sold the house, Dad went into the attic to pack up some old boxes. He called me up to help, though I wanted nothing to do with that part of the house. The air was thick, stale, and smelled like mildew. Dust hung in the flashlight beams like fog. "Strange," he muttered. "Some of these boxes aren't ours." Inside one was a stack of photographs, black and white, edges curled with age. A family of 4, parents and 2 boys, standing in front of our house. The youngest looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same scar on the chin. Dad laughed nervously. "Guess you've got a doppelganger." We burned the photos that night, but sometimes I wonder if we should have kept them. Maybe they'd have explained why I still dream of that voice, why years later I can still hear it when I close my eyes, like something trying to finish what it started. We live in Eugene now. I'm 24, working at an auto shop, trying to pretend I'm just another guy who survived a teenage scare. But every June, when the air gets heavy and the sky bruises gray, the memory returns like static. A few months ago, my mom sent me a box of my old things she'd found in storage. Buried under school papers and CDs was another voice recorder. My name written on the back. I didn't play it. I threw it in the trash. But that night, lying in bed, the wind picked up outside. The motion light flickered on even though I don't have trees near my apartment, and from somewhere in the dark, just beyond the window, I heard it again. Soft, familiar, impossibly close. "Luke, come here." Sometimes, the scariest things aren't the ones hiding in the dark. They're the echoes of what we refuse to face. Fear feeds on what we leave unresolved. Whether it's guilt, neglect, or secrets buried in our own homes, ignoring the signs doesn't make them disappear. Always trust your instincts, because when something feels wrong, it usually is. It had been years since I last set foot in Bloomfield. The street seemed narrower somehow, quieter than I remembered, lined with maple trees shedding their orange and red leaves in early October. I had just returned after my mother passed, tasked with cleaning out the family house. a two-story with peeling white paint that had been empty for months. I told myself I'd stay only a few weeks, just long enough to sort through the mess, pack what I wanted, and decide what to do next. But when I pulled up and saw the yard littered with leaves and the faint scent of decay from months of neglect, a quiet panic settled in my chest. I had invited Maddie, my best friend since childhood, to keep me company. We had survived awkward sleepovers in middle school, so surely we could survive a weekend of sorting boxes, dusting, and remembering. She arrived Friday night with snacks, blankets, and playlists we had shared in high school. "If we're gonna face ghosts," she joked, "at least let them hear good music." I laughed, though the truth was darker. The house already made me uneasy, and the new neighbor across the street didn't help. Mr. Harris, mid-40s, polite enough, waving when I first moved in. But polite didn't explain him standing outside, in the dark, staring at my house for minutes at a time. Once I caught him peeking through his blinds while I brought groceries inside. He ducked away so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. I tried to chalk it up to small-town weirdness, but every evening, I double-checked the locks. Maddie noticed him too. While we were unpacking boxes and heating pizza, she murmured, Claire, your neighbor's been standing out there for 5 minutes, just staring." I didn't argue. "He's been doing that all week. Maybe he's lonely," I said. "Lonely doesn't mean creepy," she countered. The delivery guy arrived just then, and Mr. Harris disappeared, as though he'd never been there. We laughed it off, tried to ignore the unease, and spent the night watching movies in the living room. When we finally fell asleep on the couch around midnight, the house felt quiet, but not peaceful. The sound of rain tapping against the windows was sharp, like someone else was listening too. I woke at 2:17 a.m. to a faint creak upstairs. Maddie was still asleep, and the glow from the TV gave the room an eerie pallor. I held my breath, listening. Another creak, then a slow, rhythmic tapping from the hallway above. "Maddie, wake up," I whispered. "What?" She mumbled, half asleep. "Someone's upstairs," I said, my voice shaking slightly. She blinked. "Probably the house settling." "No," I said firmly. "That's not the house. Those are footsteps." The hallway above seemed to stretch. 1, 2, 3 soft creaks. Then silence. My stomach dropped. I reached for my phone, dialing 911, keeping my voice low. "There's someone in my house," I whispered to the dispatcher. "Stay on the line," the operator said. "Can you see the person?" Before I could answer, a shadow moved in the reflection of the TV, on the staircase landing, still and watching. Maddie gasped. My fingers tightened on the phone. The back door slammed. Quick footsteps echoed. Running, then silence. I bolted toward Maddie, shaking her awake. "Go, now," I hissed. We didn't stop. Barefoot, we ran through the cold, crunchy leaves across the yard, pounding on a neighbor's door. Police arrived within minutes. Mr. Harris was nowhere in sight. The officers searched the house. Every window and door was locked. There were no signs of forced entry, except one thing. Under the stairs in the living room, they found a small, hidden space someone had been using. Blankets, half-eaten food, a pillow, even a phone charger plugged into an outlet. And photographs. Hundreds of them. Pictures of me, standing on the front porch, sitting in the living room, even opening the mailbox. They were taped in neat rows inside the hidden space. The detective explained, "Looks like he's been living here for weeks. Probably used a spare key from the mailbox. Been watching you." I couldn't breathe. The shadow I'd seen, the footsteps, the back door slamming, all real. He had been inside my house, unseen, for who knows how long. Maddie put her hand on my arm. "I told you it was more than creepy," she said softly. I didn't answer. Mr. Harris was found trembling in his living room across the street. He claimed he had been asleep the entire time. In his house, police discovered a folder filled with printed photos of me from multiple angles, inside and outside the house. His prior records indicated similar behavior in nearby towns. Local news covered it for a few days, Neighbors whispered, some with sympathy, others with fear. I couldn't stay. Not there. The house, once a place of childhood memory, had become a trap in my mind. Maddie helped me pack. "He didn't come here for you, Claire," she said quietly as we loaded boxes. "He came here because you came back." I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time, but the words lodged in my mind. My life had intersected with his in the wrong way, and it could have ended far worse. I moved into a small apartment in a nearby town. Every window faced away from the street. I triple-locked doors. I installed cameras. Sleep didn't come easy at first. Every rustle in the night, every shadow passing by made my heart race. Weeks turned into months. Counseling helped, though I never fully shook the feeling that someone was always watching, waiting for the right moment. I learned to check the locks twice, then 3 times. I learned that vigilance wasn't paranoia. It was survival. And I learned the hard way that returning to the past can bring dangers you never saw coming. Some people lurk not because they hate, but because your presence draws them like a magnet. The arrest of Mr. Harris didn't erase the fear, but it gave me boundaries, a reminder that some strangers must never cross thresholds you consider safe. Even now, years later, I glance at the street at night. Sometimes I swear I see a figure standing under a light, watching. But I've learned to keep moving, to stay inside, and to respect the warning my instincts gave me back in that old house. Returning to familiar places can awaken hidden dangers, and not every threat announces itself clearly. Trust your instincts, secure your space, and never ignore the subtle signs that something is wrong. Safety is not just about locks and doors. It's about awareness, boundaries, and listening to the unease you feel before it's too late. When I was 24, I thought I knew everything. Not about the world in any deep way, but about myself. I'd just graduated from a technical program, I had a steady enough job at a hardware store, and my uncle had left me something priceless, his old countryside home outside Portland, Maine. Rent-free. A whole place to myself. When the lawyer handed me the keys, he said, "It's a little drafty, but it's solid. Been in your family a long time." Solid. That's what I thought too the first time I walked in. The place smelled faintly of cedar and dust, like an attic that had been sealed too long. The wood floors creaked under every step, the kind of creak that made you feel the history of everyone who'd walked across them before. The wallpaper was faded and curling in spots. The kitchen cabinets were painted avocado green like something out of the 70s, and the upstairs guest room had a window that looked out on the snowy pines. It was a house that belonged to the kind of man my uncle was. Quiet, solitary, a man who liked his whiskey neat and his evenings silent. He'd died the previous winter, found slumped in his chair by a neighbor who hadn't seen him outside for days. When my mother warned me not to stay there alone, said the place carried bad luck, I laughed. She had grown up with the kind of superstitions that stuck to small New England families like Burrs. To me, it wasn't bad luck. It was an opportunity. Of course, moving in was less romantic than I'd imagined. Boxes stacked in the hallway, a refrigerator that groaned louder than it cooled, a furnace that rattled at night. But I was determined to make it work. That first Friday night, I invited my best friend Ethan over to help me unpack. We'd been inseparable since high school, the kind of friendship built on late-night drives and too many energy drinks. He was the kind of guy who could laugh in the face of anything, which is probably why I wanted him there. I didn't want to admit to myself that the silence of the place already unnerved me. Ethan pulled up just after dark, headlights sweeping across the snow. He came in carrying 2 sleeping bags, a half-broken Bluetooth speaker, and an armload of snacks. "Man," he said, dropping his bag on the couch, "this house feels like the start of a ghost story. You sure you don't got some creepy cellar with chains on the wall?" "Just an oil tank and spiders," I said. "But thanks for the vote of confidence." We laughed. I turned on the space heater in the living room, and the two of us set to work unpacking, eating chips, talking about old memories. For a little while, The house felt alive again. But as the night wore on, the wind began to pick up. The pines outside groaned, and the old window frames whistled as air pushed through cracks. At around midnight, the storm rolled in, a real Maine snowstorm, fast and furious, the kind that paints the world in white in minutes. The power flickered once, then twice, then died completely. We lit candles, laughed it off, and sat cross-legged on the floor playing cards. "Feels like a camp-out," Ethan said, shuffling the deck, "except in a house that definitely wants to kill us." I smirked, but deep down the words made me uneasy. He was joking, of course, but the truth is there was something about that house. Some heaviness in the air, like the silence wasn't empty but waiting. That was when the front door creaked open. We froze. The sound cut clean through the laughter, through the hiss of wind outside. Just a long, slow groan of wood and hinges. Ethan glanced at me, his face pale in the candlelight. Was that the wind? I swallowed, grabbed the flashlight from the counter, and walked toward the door. My pulse hammered. When I reached it, I saw it was standing slightly ajar. Snow blew in across the threshold, and there, on the wood floor, were footprints. Wet footprints. Large ones. My stomach dropped. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking. "It was open," I said, my voice flat. Ethan looked at the floor, then at me. His grin had disappeared. "Maybe your uncle's old tenant came back." "He didn't have one," I said. "He lived alone for 15 years. Neither of us spoke after that. We just stared at the wet prints, listening to the storm rage outside. And for the first time that night, I felt truly afraid. The snow outside only thickened, flakes slamming against the windows like tiny fists. Ethan and I tried to shake it off, tried to go back to playing cards, to laughing about stupid high school memories, but the silence after that creak hung too heavy. "Let's just go upstairs," I finally said. "Set up our sleeping bags, maybe get some sleep." Ethan nodded, though I could see the unease in his eyes. We gathered our stuff and climbed the creaky staircase. The guest room had been my uncle's catch-all storage space, but I'd cleared most of it. The wallpaper was faded floral, the kind that peeled at the corners. We rolled out our sleeping bags side by side on the floor, set the flashlight between us. For a moment, the room felt almost cozy. Then I noticed the glow outside. Through the curtain of falling snow, I could see Ethan's car parked at the edge of the driveway. Its headlights were faintly glowing. "Hey," I said slowly. "You sure you turned your lights off?" Ethan frowned. "Yeah, I did. Why?" I didn't answer. I just pointed. He came to the window, squinted through the snow. His face went slack. No way. Because there in the driver's seat was a silhouette. Someone sitting motionless, head tilted toward the house. "That's not funny," Ethan whispered. I wanted to believe it was a trick of the snow, a reflection, something. But it wasn't. We could both see it. Solid. Undeniable. We didn't think. We just bolted. Down the stairs, through the living room to the front door. I yanked it open, cold air slapping my face. The car sat in the storm, headlights glowing faintly. But the seat was empty. Snow stung my eyes as I stared. My breath came out in frantic clouds. Ethan pointed. "Look." Fresh footprints led from the car to the porch. And just then, upstairs, a floorboard creaked. We froze. The sound was slow, deliberate. One step, then another. The boards groaned above our heads. The guest room. "Did we lock that window?" Ethan whispered. My throat felt dry. "No." The flashlight in my hand flickered as we climbed the stairs. Each step echoed too loud, like the house was amplifying it. When we reached the guest room, the door was half open. I pushed it. The room was empty. Empty, except for Ethan's backpack, now sitting upright against the bed. He hadn't moved it there. Before either of us could speak, the closet door clicked. Slowly, it opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, soaked in snow, his black coat dripping on the carpet. His face was half hidden by a torn ski mask, and in his hand he held a crowbar. He didn't speak, just tilted his head like he was choosing. Ethan threw the flashlight at him. The man flinched, just for a second, but it was enough. We bolted, down the stairs through the living room to the back door. My hands fumbled at the lock as his boots pounded behind us. We burst into the storm, barefoot, snow biting our skin, and sprinted across the road to the neighbor's porch. I hammered on the door until lights flicked on inside. By the time the police arrived, the man was gone. But what they found chilled me more than seeing him face to face. Under my couch, they pulled out rope, a roll of tape, and when Ethan checked his jacket, his spare car key was missing. He hadn't just walked in that night. He'd been planning something longer. Ethan left town not long after, moved to Boston for work. He didn't say it outright, but I knew the real reason. He couldn't sleep in Maine anymore, not after that. Me? I stayed. Rent-free meant more than comfort. It meant survival. I was too broke to walk away. But the house changed. Nights grew heavier, the silence thicker. Even after the police boarded the windows, I'd hear footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. Sometimes I'd wake to find wet footprints by the guest room door. The cops told me it was old water damage. These houses settle weird, one of them said. But I knew better, because I never unlocked that door again. Weeks passed. Snow gave way to muddy spring. Friends stopped visiting. My mom begged me to leave, but I couldn't. Still, I felt watched. I'd walk into the kitchen and see the curtain sway like someone had just brushed past it. I'd wake in the night to hear the faint sound of boots on wood. Once, I came home to find the back door standing open. The police found nothing, but I never found my peace. The night with Ethan became a scar that wouldn't close. Even after I finally left the house that summer, I carried it with me. Every creak of a floorboard in a new apartment, every hum of silence at 3 a.m., it all dragged me back. And sometimes when I dream, I still see him, the man in the mask, waiting in the closet. Sometimes we convince ourselves we're safe just because the doors are locked, the windows are boarded, and the world outside feels distant. But danger doesn't always break down the front door. It waits in the quiet, studies our routines, and finds the cracks we refuse to see. Trust your instincts. Never ignore the small warnings, and never assume you're alone just because you can't see anyone. When I first moved to Boulder, I thought I'd finally escaped the weight of everything that had been dragging me under. I was 27, starting fresh after a bad breakup that had eaten the last 2 years of my life. My sister had left for Europe. My parents had split and were embroiled in their own dramas, and I had spent too many weekends hiding under blankets with Netflix and takeout. So when I landed a tech job downtown, it felt like a lifeline. A modest townhouse near the edge of the city seemed like exactly what I needed. Quiet, simple, and mine. The place wasn't fancy. 2 floors, thin walls, creaky stairs, and a backyard the size of a postage stamp. But after years of living in apartments, having no one above or below me felt like a luxury. I decorated in small bursts, mostly thrift store finds and hand-me-downs from my sister. By October, it had started to feel like home. Still, the loneliness clung to me. Nights were quiet, too quiet, and I often found myself scrolling my phone just for the sound of someone else's voice. That's why, when Olivia called one Thursday insisting on a sleepover weekend, I agreed before she'd even finished the sentence. Olivia had been my anchor since college, the one person who could drag me out of my own head. "I'm serious," she said on the phone. "You've been in Boulder 3 months and you've turned into a hermit. I'm coming over Friday night. We're doing a full weekend, snacks, movies, everything." "I'm not a hermit," I protested, though I was a little. "But fine, bring the good chips." Friday came fast. By 5:30 we'd unpacked her overnight bag, dumped snacks on the counter, and built a makeshift fort of blankets and fairy lights in my living room. Olivia curled up on a pile of pillows, sighing happily. "This is the comfiest fort ever," she said. "It's either this or the couch," I laughed. and my couch is basically a plank. It felt almost normal, like college again, like a time before things got complicated, but normal didn't last long. Just as I went to close the blinds, I noticed a white envelope taped to my front door handle. At first I thought it was a flyer, but it was thick, and my full name was written on the front in looping cursive. Who would leave a letter at this hour? I muttered. Olivia crawled from the fort, peeking. Maybe a neighbor. I tore it open. Inside was a single note, handwritten in the same neat cursive. I've been watching you. We need to meet tomorrow at 9 p.m. Don't be late. The words felt heavy in my hand. My stomach sank. Olivia. I showed her the note. Her brow furrowed. Well, that's creepy. Do you know who it is? No idea. Could be some prank, I guess. But something about the handwriting, its precision, its deliberateness felt too personal, too intimate. We tried to shrug it off. We piled into the fort with sodas and popcorn, flicked on a movie, and pretended not to think about the envelope. But every time thunder rattled the windows, I felt my shoulders tighten. At 8:15, I got up to refill our bowls. As I passed the sliding glass door that led to the backyard, I noticed it standing slightly ajar. Olivia, did you leave this open? I asked quietly. She shook her head. I locked it firmly, but a chill ran up my spine. Maybe it's nothing, I muttered, though my voice sounded hollow. By 10 o'clock, the storm outside had grown louder, wind clawing at the siding, rain hammering the glass. We decided to play board games, hoping the distraction would help. But as we rolled dice, a faint sound drifted from upstairs, soft thuds like someone pacing. Did you hear that? Olivia whispered. I nodded slowly. Probably the wind, but I knew the townhouse above us was empty. The only upstairs rooms were mine. I tried to act calm, but my heart was racing. I told Olivia I'd check the mailbox, partly to see if there was another note, partly just to get away from the sound. When I opened the box, my breath caught. Another envelope, same handwriting. You missed the meetup. This is your only warning. DN. I stared at it, rain dripping down my sleeve. Olivia. My hands trembled. This is serious. Someone's targeting me. We spent the next hour pacing the living room, pulling curtains closed, moving chairs in front of the doors. Olivia's phone flashlight darted from lock to lock like a lighthouse beam. This is insane, she muttered. Call the police. And say what? Someone left me notes? They won't do anything until something happens. She glared at me. Something's already happening. At midnight, my nerves felt frayed to nothing. I decided to take a quick shower to calm down. Olivia stayed in the living room, scrolling for the non-emergency police number. The bathroom filled with steam. I tried to focus on the water, on the smell of my shampoo, anything but the tightness in my chest. That's when I heard it. A soft creak, then a scrape near the shower curtain. Olivia? My voice cracked. No answer. I threw the curtain back hard in my throat. No one was there. But my phone, which I'd left on the counter, was gone. I wrapped a towel around me and ran to the living room. The front door stood open again, wind and rain spilling in. Olivia was frozen, eyes locked on something behind me. A figure in black stood just inside the living room, motionless, watching. Run, I whispered. Olivia didn't need telling twice. We bolted for the rarely used bedroom balcony door, fumbling with the lock. Rain hit us like ice as we scrambled outside. Behind us, the figure moved closer, slow and deliberate. We climbed over the railing, dropped onto the wet grass, and sprinted barefoot across the street to the neighbor's porch, pounding on their door. A middle-aged man answered, startled. What the... Please, call the police, I gasped. Someone's in my house. He let us in without another word. Olivia clung to her phone, voice shaking as she gave our address. By the time officers arrived, the intruder was gone. They found wet footprints from the balcony into the living room, muddy streaks where someone had stood watching us. Whoever it was had known exactly when to appear. I told the police everything, the notes, the door, the figure. One officer asked if I recognized the man. I hesitated. The glimpse had been brief, but something about him, his posture, his face, felt familiar. Like someone I'd passed downtown, but not a stranger. Olivia never stayed over again. I couldn't blame her. For weeks I slept with the lights on, doors double locked, a baseball bat within reach. The police never caught him. They logged the notes as evidence, dusted for prints, but nothing matched. Could be a stalker, one detective said. Could be a prank gone too far. But I knew it wasn't a prank. Whoever he was, he knew my name. He'd watched me long enough to know my routines. He'd planned the timing, the letters, the appearance. He wanted me afraid. Nearly a year later, the feeling hasn't left. Sometimes at night I wake to the sound of soft footsteps near the balcony. Sometimes out of the corner of my eye, I see a shadow where there shouldn't be one. I keep telling myself it's my imagination, that he's gone, that I'm safe. But when I think of that envelope, the precise handwriting, the way he stood there in silence while we escaped, I know he isn't done. He's just waiting. Danger doesn't always arrive with noise or warning. It can slip quietly into your life, through a note, an open door, a familiar face you don't recognize soon enough. Trust your instincts, protect your boundaries, and never assume that because something feels harmless at first, it truly is. I was 25, fresh out of college and already exhausted with life. My first year working at a tech firm in Denver had nearly broken me. Long hours, endless deadlines, and no real friends in the city. My family wasn't much help either. Mom was living in another state with her new husband, and Dad stopped calling after the divorce. I spent most weekends alone, eating fast food and watching shows I barely paid attention to. That's why, when Brandon called, I didn't even hesitate. "Dude, we haven't hung out in forever. Come up to the lake cabin this weekend. Just you, me, and Lucas. You need this." Brandon had been one of my closest friends in college. We'd lost touch after graduation, but hearing his voice again felt like stepping back into easier times. I said yes without even asking about the details. Friday evening, I tossed a duffel bag into my trunk and drove the winding mountain roads toward Lake Arrowhead. The air grew colder as the sun dipped behind the peaks, pine trees crowding the highway like silent sentinels. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway, night was pressing down hard, and the chill in the air hinted at an early winter. Brandon and Lucas were waiting on the porch. Lucas was taller now, 17, and already carrying himself with that restless energy of someone trying to look older than he was. He waved a flashlight at me dramatically. "You sure this place isn't haunted?" he joked, shining the beam across the dark trees. Brandon grinned, clapping me on the back when I stepped out of the car. "Relax, man. The only ghosts here are from Mom's terrible stories back in the 90s. The cabin looked like something out of a postcard. Wood paneling, smoke curling faintly from the chimney, a small deck overlooking the dark ripple of the lake below. Inside, it was warm, golden light bouncing off old furniture and shelves filled with books and board games. We wasted no time setting up our sleepover spot in the living room. Blankets draped over the sofa and coffee table, pillows piled high. Brandon called it the ultimate fort, and Lucas rolled his eyes but climbed in anyway. By the time we were playing cards and eating chips, it felt like being 16 again. Laughter echoing, thunder rumbling outside, the three of us tucked away from the world. Until the first knock came. It was subtle at first, a soft tap against the front door, almost swallowed by the storm outside. Still, it froze us mid-laugh. "You heard that, right?" Lucas asked. Brandon shrugged, trying to stay casual. "Probably the wind." But when I walked over with the flashlight, the door was cracked open, just enough to let the cold seep in. My pulse quickened. I swung it wide. Nothing. Just the porch, the forest swaying violently in the wind, branches scraping against one another. But the air carried something else too. An uneasy stillness beneath the storm. I shut the door tight, sliding the bolt. Someone forgot to lock this. Back in the fort, Lucas whispered, "We're not alone." He tried to sound sarcastic, but the way his eyes darted toward the hall betrayed him. We went back to our game, but it wasn't the same. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Every creak of the cabin felt deliberate. Around 9:30, the power flickered once, twice, then held. Brandon muttered, "Old place does that sometimes." But even his voice had lost its confidence. Then came the sound from the hallway. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Floorboards creaking one by one as though someone, or something, was walking toward us. "Animal," Brandon whispered. I shook my head, grabbing a wooden chair. No animal walks like that. The lights went out completely. We scrambled for candles, the room dimly lit by wavering flames. Shadows stretched across the walls like long, grasping fingers. Then, wet footsteps. Not just creaks anymore. Slow, sticky sounds moving closer from the hall. Lucas's voice cracked. "This isn't funny." Brandon swallowed hard. "Stay here. I'll check upstairs." I grabbed his arm. "Wait. We stick together." So we did. All three of us crept toward the bedrooms, the air cold enough that I could see my breath in the flickering candlelight. The master bedroom smelled faintly of dust and pine. Everything looked undisturbed, until the closet door creaked open. We froze. Inside was nothing but coats and old boots. But when I turned my head, I caught something in the dresser mirror. A figure, tall, draped in black, standing just behind us in the doorway. I spun, chair raised high, but the doorway was empty. Lucas screamed. Brandon shoved him toward the back of the cabin. "Go, now!" We bolted, bare feet pounding against wood, the cabin groaning as if it too were alive. The back door jammed at first, sticking against the frame. I yanked it open with all my strength, and the storm swallowed us. Cold rain soaked us instantly as we stumbled into the grass. Behind us, in the glow of the single candle still burning inside, the black figure stood watching. Motionless. Silent. We didn't stop. We ran across the yard into the woods, branches cutting our arms, mud slick beneath us. The neighbor's cabin came into view, a faint glow in the distance. We banged on their door until an older man answered, confused and alarmed. I barely got the words out. "Someone's in our cabin." He let us in, locking the door behind us. Brandon called the police. By the time officers arrived, the figure was gone. But muddy footprints marked the cabin floor, from the porch, through the living room, into the bedrooms, and back again. Nothing was taken. Nothing was broken. But someone had been there. Watching. Waiting. We never went back. Brandon's parents eventually sold the place, but sometimes he'd tell me late at night over the phone. I still see him, out there by the trees, looking at the lake. Lucas refused to talk about it. He pretended it never happened. As for me, I hear it still in the quiet hours of the night. The creak of floorboards that don't exist anymore. The whisper of wet footsteps just beyond the door. The worst part isn't that we don't know who or what was in that cabin. The worst part is knowing it wasn't random. He, or it, was waiting. And maybe still is. Evil doesn't always come crashing in with violence. Sometimes it enters quietly, testing the doors we forget to lock, listening for the silence between our laughter. Never ignore the uneasy feeling in your gut. Instinct is your first warning, and sometimes your only protection.